We found a nice package of sediment further in the cave, and that dated to about 2 million years ago. That one in the middle is a fault line. It was formed because of tectonic movements of the earth. What if the moment the Euphrates River is drying, something beneath it is finally being revealed? Right now, this ancient river is receding at an alarming rate, exposing an entrance carved deep into stone hidden beneath centuries of sediment. But this isn't just ruins. Archaeologists are reporting a sealed underground complex, a temple etched with distorted human figures, and a warning that has survived thousands of years. Guardians below must not be disturbed. For generations, locals have whispered the same thing. When the river dries, something buried begins to rise. Jesus warned that in the last days hidden things would be revealed, that signs would appear not in one place but across the earth. So if the river is drying exactly as Scripture described, what was meant to stay hidden beneath it? If this message speaks to you, leave a comment below and share what you feel. Stand in your faith. Don't stay silent. Because sometimes the moment we speak out is the moment we wake up. The Euphrates River, once the lifeline of ancient civilizations, is now receding at a rate that is difficult to ignore. Stretching from Turkey through Syria and Iraq, this river sustained human life for over 10,000 years. But as its waters pull back, something unexpected is being revealed. Not just history, but something intentionally hidden. Cracks across the drying riverbed have exposed what first appeared to be a shadow in the sediment. But that shadow became an entrance carved with precision into ancient rock. When archaeologists stepped inside, they expected ruins scattered by time. Instead, they found a sealed underground complex, structured, deliberate, and preserved. Carbon analysis suggests parts of it date back to around 2,800 BCE. Placing it among the earliest engineered constructions ever discovered in the region. As excavation teams moved deeper into the chamber beneath, what they encountered began to shift the entire meaning of the site. The walls were not empty. They were covered carefully, deliberately, with carvings unlike anything expected in a conventional temple. Elongated humanoid figures stretched across the stone, their limbs unnaturally thin. Their forms almost skeletal. Their eyes appeared doubled, layered, as if seeing in more than one dimension. And above their heads, serpent-like crowns coiled upward, forming shapes that felt both symbolic and unsettling. At first glance, some researchers noted similarities to ancient Mesopotamian depictions. Figures reminiscent of the Anunnaki, the so-called descendants of Anu, who in early civilizations were believed to govern the heavens, the earth, and even the underworld. In ancient cities like Uruk and Babylon, these beings were not feared but revered, seen as judges, rulers, and intermediaries between humanity and the divine. Yet here the representation feels different, as if what was once honored had become something else entirely. A warning preserved through millennia. When the river retreats, the eye of the buried one opens. Local villagers have repeated similar words for generations, refusing to approach the exposed site. Some claim the temple was never meant to be discovered at all. To them, this was never just a forgotten site. It was a place to avoid. Now, with the carvings fully exposed, researchers are beginning to ask a question that changes everything. Was this a temple built for worship or a structure built to contain something? In the Bible, not everything hidden is meant to remain hidden forever. There are moments when what is restrained is released, not randomly but at an appointed time. This pattern appears again in stories like the binding of spiritual forces, or even in the narrative of the flood, where what was once contained beneath the earth was suddenly unleashed. Returning to the excavation beneath the Euphrates River, when excavation teams finally broke through the last layer of compacted stone and stepped into what appeared to be the temple's innermost chamber, they expected a shrine, perhaps a collapsed altar or ceremonial platform. What stood before them, however, felt calculated rather than devotional. The innermost chamber was carved from dense black basalt stone, not native to the region. Geological analysis suggests it may have been transported from a distant volcanic source, an effort that would have required coordination far beyond what is typically assumed of early civilizations. The walls were unnaturally smooth, polished to a reflective surface resembling obsidian yet colder to the touch. Even after hours underground, the air remained stable, cooler than the desert heat above, as if the chamber was designed to preserve something. At the center stood a geometric altar, precise in its angles, flanked by two upright pillars embedded with metallic inlays. When magnets were placed near these lines, subtle reactions occurred, suggesting conductive materials hidden within the stone itself. But the most striking detail came through measurement. The proportions of the chamber align almost perfectly with Earth's axial precession cycle, approximately 26,000 years. This is not symbolic symmetry. It is astronomical precision. The entire structure appears calibrated to the movement of the heavens. In Book of Psalms 19:1 it is written, "The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands." From the creation story in Genesis, where God sets the sun, moon, and stars for signs and seasons, to the movements of constellations referenced in the Book of Job, the Bible consistently presents the universe as a reflection of divine order. In one corner of the chamber, shallow grooves carved into the stone formed a precise network directing liquid toward a central drain. This was not random erosion, it was intentional design. When samples were analyzed, high iron content was detected consistent with blood. But what unsettled researchers most was not just the substance, it was the pattern. The layout suggested repetition, structure, and control. On the northern wall, the carvings deepen the mystery. Rows of kneeling figures face a horned entity rising from the ground as if emerging from beneath the earth itself. Above them, a circular celestial diagram displays 1-2 pointed stars, unlike known Mesopotamian symbols. In scripture, the number 12 represents divine order. The 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 apostles. But here that order appears imitated or distorted, and that contrast matters, because the Bible draws a clear line between true worship and corrupted worship. Humanity has always reached toward the heavens, but not every path leads to God. In Book of Genesis 4:10, God says to Cain, "The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground." This reveals something deeper. Innocent blood is never forgotten. The earth itself becomes a witness. What is done in secret is not erased. So when we see a structure where blood appears to have been repeatedly directed into the ground, the meaning becomes heavier, not as proof of something supernatural, but as a reflection of a truth repeated throughout Scripture. Nothing stays hidden forever. And perhaps what this chamber reveals is not just an ancient practice, but a reminder of the line humanity was never meant to cross. Deeper within, archaeologists uncovered something that may be even more significant than the structure itself: a hidden library. Not scattered fragments, but hundreds of clay tablets carefully stored inside sealed stone compartments preserved against time and water. Each tablet carried inscriptions in ancient languages, Sumerian, Akkadian, and scripts that remain unidentified. The writings appear to document laws, ritual systems, and detailed celestial observations, suggesting a level of knowledge far more structured than expected. What makes this discovery remarkable is the method of preservation. The tablets were coated in bitumen, a natural waterproof substance, allowing them to survive for thousands of years beneath the river. Some inscriptions reference rulers whose names do not appear in known historical records. Others hint at systems of knowledge, astronomical, spiritual, and possibly technological, that have been lost over time. If verified, this discovery could reshape our understanding of early civilization. But beyond history, there is symbolism here. A library buried beneath a river, sealed, protected. and hidden until the water recedes. It reflects a deeper idea that truth is not destroyed, only concealed until the right moment. In Book of Daniel 12:4 it is written, "But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase." In the story of Daniel, prophetic visions were not meant to be fully understood immediately. They were preserved for a future generation, one that would be ready to comprehend them. That idea carries through Scripture. There are moments when truth is revealed not because it suddenly appears, but because the time has come. So when we see a buried library emerging as the river dries, it becomes more than an archaeological discovery, but within the excavation itself, the focus remains grounded. Researchers are now cataloging, translating, and cross-referencing each tablet, trying to separate verifiable history from speculation. For them, the significance is not in drawing conclusions too quickly, but in understanding what these records actually represent. Because at this stage, the discovery raises more questions than answers. Not about prophecy, but about how much of human history is still waiting beneath the surface. Not far from the chamber and the submerged library beneath the Euphrates River, excavation teams uncovered another layer of the past. Sealed burial chambers hidden beneath compacted sediment. These were not ordinary graves. They were royal tombs. Inside, archaeologists found ornate sarcophagi crafted with precision, containing gold ornaments, ceremonial weapons, and jeweled crowns, and artifacts made from lapis lazuli and carnelian materials associated with ancient Mesopotamian royalty point to individuals of immense status and power. Every detail suggests these were rulers once feared, honored, and remembered, yet now completely unknown. Some inscriptions carved into the stone walls and burial objects are still being studied. If translated, they may reveal names that have vanished from recorded history. Kings who ruled cities, commanded armies, and shaped civilizations only to be erased by time. These tombs stand as a quiet contrast to everything above them. Power, wealth, influence, all carefully preserved in death, yet none of it remained visible. Entire dynasties reduced to silence beneath the earth. In Book of Ecclesiastes 5:15 it is written, "As he came forth of his mother's womb, naked shall he return, and shall take nothing of his labor." The verse speaks directly to the illusion of permanence. No matter how great a king becomes, no matter how much he gathers, none of it follows him beyond the grave. There is a powerful biblical parallel in the story of Nebuchadnezzar II, one of the greatest rulers of ancient Babylon. At the height of his power, he stood over his kingdom and declared his own greatness. But according to Scripture, he was humbled, stripped of his authority, driven into isolation until he recognized that all power ultimately belongs to God. His story is not just about judgment, it is about perspective. Because standing inside these tombs, surrounded by symbols of authority and wealth, one truth becomes unavoidable. Everything that once defined these rulers stayed behind. For archaeologists, these discoveries are invaluable records of ancient history. Each artifact adds detail to a civilization we are still trying to understand. But beyond the scientific significance, there is a human reflection here, one that has been repeated across time. When archaeologists began reviewing the audio recordings captured inside the deeper sections beneath the Euphrates River, what they found wasn't immediately understood, but it was felt. The recordings revealed deep infrasonic tones, frequencies below the range of human hearing. These are not sounds you consciously hear, but they are known to affect the body. Researchers reported subtle pressure unease, even a sense of being watched while working near the chamber. Instruments confirmed that these tones followed rhythmic patterns, not random, not environmental noise, but structured pulses moving through the ground. At first, the explanation pointed toward geology. Subterranean cavities can amplify natural vibrations. Temperature shifts, pressure changes, and rock density can all produce low-frequency resonance. But as multiple recordings were analyzed, some researchers began to describe it differently. Something beneath the surface repeating, cycling, responding. What makes this discovery significant is not just the sound itself, but what it represents. For most of human history, phenomena like this would have gone completely unnoticed. The human ear cannot detect these frequencies. It is only through modern technology that we are even aware they exist. That realization alone introduces a kind of humility and acknowledgement that reality extends beyond what we naturally perceive. In Scripture, there is a similar idea. In Epistle to the Romans 8:22 it says, "For we know that the whole creation groans together." The verse is often understood spiritually, a reflection of a world affected by brokenness, waiting for restoration. But the imagery is striking. Creation itself described as producing a kind of sound, a tension beneath the surface. There are moments in the Bible where the earth responds in ways that go beyond human control. When Jesus died, the ground shook. When walls fell in Jericho, it followed a pattern of sound and timing. These events were not explained through science, but they reveal a consistent theme. The physical world is not as silent or static as it appears. So, when modern instruments begin to detect structured vibrations beneath an ancient site, the question isn't whether it's supernatural or natural. It's something simpler and more unsettling. How much of what is happening around us has always been there, we just didn't have the ability to hear it before. And now that we can, what exactly are we listening to? As the investigation beneath the river continues, what begins to emerge is not just a structure, but a convergence. Geometry, acoustics, celestial alignment, and ritual design are all present within the same confined space. Each element, when studied on its own, can be explained. Ancient people observed the stars. They understood sound resonance. They developed symbolic systems tied to cycles and seasons. But here, these elements are not separate. They are integrated, layered together with a precision that suggests intention beyond isolated function. The chamber aligns with celestial cycles. The walls respond to sound frequencies. The floor channels material in controlled patterns. The carvings depict beings rising from below, and the inscriptions warn of something that must not be disturbed. Individually, these details point to advanced understanding. Together, they form a pattern of timing, a pattern of control, a pattern of restraint, and that pattern echoes something deeply familiar in Scripture. In 2nd Epistle to the Thessalonians 2:7, it speaks of something that is restrained, held back until the moment it is allowed to be revealed. The text does not describe a structure or a place. It describes a principle that not everything unfolds at once, that there are forces, events, and realities that exist but are not yet released. This idea appears again and again throughout biblical history. In the time of Noah, the earth reached a point where its corruption was described as complete. Yet the flood did not come immediately. There was a period of warning, of preparation. The ark was built over time. The moment of release, the breaking of the waters, came only when the appointed time arrived. In the story of the Tower of Babel, humanity attempted to unify knowledge, language, and ambition into a single act to reach beyond their limits. The structure itself was not the problem. It was the intention behind it. And in response, that unified system was restrained, scattered, and interrupted. Then there is the story of King Solomon. According to Scripture, Solomon was granted wisdom beyond any other ruler. He built the temple in Jerusalem with precise measurements, proportions, and materials reflecting divine instruction. But later traditions and interpretations suggest that knowledge itself carries responsibility. That understanding the structure of the world, its order, its patterns, does not automatically lead to alignment with God. It can also lead to misuse. This tension runs through the entire biblical narrative. Humanity is given the ability to observe the heavens. In Genesis, the stars are described as signs and markers of seasons. In the book of Job, constellations are named and described as part of God's creation. The heavens are meant to be understood but not controlled. And yet again and again, there are moments where that line becomes unclear. When knowledge, power, and intention begin to overlap, So when a structure is discovered that appears to combine celestial alignment, acoustic response, symbolic imagery, and physical containment, it raises a question that is not easily resolved. Was this a place of observation or interaction? Was it built to reflect the order of creation or to engage with something beyond it? Because throughout Scripture, the idea of restraint is not about limitation. It is about timing. There are moments when things are held back not because they do not exist, but because the world is not yet ready for them. And if that principle is true, if there are things that exist beneath the surface, aligned with cycles we barely understand, structured in ways that reflect both knowledge and intention, then the discovery of such a place does not simply point to the past. It begins to press against something still unfolding. What is unfolding beneath the Euphrates River is no longer an isolated moment. Across the world, similar patterns are beginning to appear. As drought conditions intensify, rivers recede and water levels drop, ancient structures are being exposed in places once thought fully known. In India, submerged temple complexes have surfaced along drying riverbanks. In parts of China, long-buried stone formations and forgotten settlements are re-emerging. Even in Europe, shifting water levels have revealed remnants of roads, foundations, and entire villages hidden beneath lakes and rivers for centuries. From a scientific perspective, these discoveries are not unexpected. Climate cycles shift, water levels rise and fall, geological changes expose what was once buried. Researchers point to environmental patterns, drought, heat, and long-term climate variation as the primary explanation. Each event, when examined individually, fits within established understanding. But what draws attention is not just the events themselves, it is their timing and their convergence. Multiple regions, multiple discoveries, all within a relatively narrow window of time. This idea that what was hidden begins to resurface in cycles is not unfamiliar within Scripture. In Book of Ecclesiastes 1:9, it is written, "What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun." This is not a statement about repetition without meaning. It is a reflection on pattern cycles that move through history, bringing past and present into alignment. What once existed does not vanish completely. There is a similar pattern in the story of the Exodus. For generations, the people of Israel lived in Egypt, their identity shaped by time, hardship, and silence. Their story seemed buried within a foreign land, but at an appointed moment, what had been hidden, their identity, their calling, was brought back into the open. The Red Sea itself, a barrier of water, parted, not just as a miracle, but as a revealing. A path appeared where none existed before. Water in Scripture often conceals until it reveals. In the story of Moses, his life begins hidden, placed in the river, concealed among reeds. But at the right time, he is drawn out, raised up, and becomes the one who leads others through water into freedom. The pattern repeats: concealment, preservation, then unveiling. In First Book of Samuel 3:1, it says, "The word of the Lord was rare in those days. There was no frequent vision." There are seasons when truth seems distant, buried, inaccessible, but those seasons do not last forever. Then there are moments when what was silent begins to speak again. The prophet Ezekiel was shown a valley of dry bones, scattered, lifeless, forgotten. Yet in that vision, the bones came together, flesh returned, and breath entered them. What appeared lost was not gone. It was waiting. These stories are not about archaeology. They are about timing. So when structures emerge from beneath rivers across different parts of the world, the question is not simply what they are, but why now? Because history does not always move forward in a straight line. Sometimes it circles back. Sometimes it uncovers what was left behind. And sometimes it brings the past into the present in ways that are not immediately understood. The Euphrates River is not just a river of geography. It is a river woven into the earliest memory of humanity. In Book of Genesis 2:14, it is named as one of the 4 rivers flowing from Eden, a place not only of origin but of order, where humanity first walked in alignment with God. In that setting, rivers were not barriers, they were life direction and structure dividing the land and sustaining it. The Euphrates stood at the edge of that beginning, marking both provision and boundary. Boundaries matter in Scripture. When God placed Adam in the garden, there was freedom, but also a line that was not to be crossed. The knowledge of good and evil. Evil was not hidden, but it was restricted. And when that boundary was broken, the consequence was not immediate destruction, but separation. An unfolding process that changed the course of human history. From that moment, the story of humanity becomes a movement away from Eden and a longing to return. The Euphrates appears again not in a place of innocence, but in a world shaped by kingdoms, empires, and power. It becomes a dividing line between nations, a strategic boundary in wars, a place where civilizations rise and fall. In Book of Joshua 1:4, it is described as part of the land promised to Israel, extending from the wilderness in this Lebanon even unto the great river, the river Euphrates. Here, the river represents expansion, inheritance, and the unfolding of a covenant. But history shows that what is given can also be lost. The empires that once flourished along the Euphrates, Assyria, Babylon, rose to power and then disappeared. In Book of Isaiah 13, Babylon is described in its glory, yet also in its fall. The same land that held wealth, influence, and control became a place of slants. The river remained, but everything around it changed. In Book of Revelation 6:12, the Euphrates appears again, but this time in a very different context. It is no longer a source of life or a boundary between kingdoms. It becomes something that is removed, its waters dried up, preparing the way for what comes next. The imagery is not detailed, but it is intentional. A river that once marked the beginning is now involved in a transition. There are other moments in Scripture where physical places carry this kind of dual meaning. The Jordan River, for example, is not just water, it is a crossing point. When Joshua leads the people across it, it marks the end of wandering and the beginning of settlement. When Jesus is baptized there, it marks the beginning of his ministry. The same location, different moments, each carrying significance beyond the surface. So when the Euphrates begins to change, when its waters recede and its bed is exposed, it naturally draws attention. Not only because of what is being revealed, but because of what the river represents. A place tied to origin, a place tied to empire, a place tied to transition. This does not mean that every physical event fulfills a specific prophecy. Scripture does not require that level of certainty, but it does show that certain locations, certain patterns, and certain moments carry layered meaning across time. And when those layers begin to overlap, when a river associated with beginnings and endings starts to shift in a visible way, it invites a different kind of question, not just about what is happening to the river, but about where this moment fits within a much larger story. At this stage, no confirmed evidence points to anything supernatural being released or contained beneath the Euphrates River. Scientific explanations remain grounded and consistent. Geological shifts, climate-driven drought, and natural exposure of buried structures. Each element taken individually can be understood, and yet when viewed together, the structure, the timing, the symbolism, something begins to feel less like coincidence and more like convergence. Not proof, but pattern. And throughout Scripture, pattern is often where meaning begins. In Book of Habakkuk 2:3 it says, "For the vision is yet for an appointed time, though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come." This speaks of events not arriving randomly, but unfolding when their time has come, not early, not late. There is a similar moment in the life of Joseph. Sold into Egypt, forgotten in prison, his story seemed buried, hidden beneath years of silence. But at the exact moment when interpretation was needed, when Pharaoh dreamed, Joseph was brought forward. What had been concealed was not lost. It was waiting for the right time to be revealed. The same pattern appears in the story of King Hezekiah. When confronted with overwhelming threat, time itself seemed to shift. The shadow on the sundial moved backward. not to disrupt order, but to confirm that time in Scripture is not only measured, it is directed. Even the life of John the Baptist follows this rhythm. He lived in obscurity in the wilderness, unknown to most until the moment came when his voice was needed. Then suddenly what had been hidden stepped into the open, preparing the way for what was next. These stories do not describe archaeology. They describe timing, moments when something long unseen becomes visible, not because it suddenly exists, but because the moment has arrived. So when structures emerge, when patterns align, when discoveries surface across regions and disciplines, the question does not have to move towards speculation. It can remain here, not asking what is being unleashed, but whether we are standing in a moment where something long buried is simply being brought into the light. There is a consistent pattern that runs quietly through Scripture, not through noise, but through unveiling, not through sudden chaos, but through moments where what was hidden becomes visible at the right time. In Gospel of Luke 8:17 it is written, "For nothing is hidden that will not be disclosed, nor anything concealed that will not be known or brought out into the open." This is not a warning of fear, but a principle of truth. What is buried does not remain buried forever. Jesus himself spoke in patterns. In Gospel of Matthew 24:33, he said, "When you see all these things, know that it is near, right at the door." Not one sign, not one event, but a convergence. This idea appears long before the New Testament. In Book of Esther, an entire story unfolds behind the scenes. God is never directly named yet. Every event aligns timing, position, decision, until what was hidden becomes clear. A threat rises quietly, and just as quietly it is exposed, not by force, but by timing. Then there is the story of David. Before he was king, he was unseen, shepherding in the fields, overlooked even by his own family. Yet when the moment came, he was called forward. What was hidden was not forgotten. It was preserved, and in Gospel of Mark 4:22 it says, "For whatever is hidden is meant to be disclosed, and whatever is concealed is meant to be brought out into the open." Again, not randomness, but intention. So when we look at what is happening, structures emerging, patterns aligning, questions rising, the Bible does not demand a conclusion. It invites awareness, because history, according to Scripture, does not move in isolated events. It moves in patterns that repeat, reveal, and point forward at the same time. So the question remains, if this structure was never meant to be found, why is it being revealed now? If the Euphrates connects the beginning and the end, where are we standing in that story? And if history truly moves in cycles, are we witnessing a discovery or a moment of timing? If you've stayed with this all the way through, thank you for watching. And if something in this message stayed with you, don't ignore it.